Beneath the Egyptian desert runs a tunnel more than 300 meters long. Inside it stand stone boxes as heavy as a locomotive, each one carved from a single block of granite, each one hidden 12 meters underground. And after a century and a half of study, one question still has no answer. How did the ancient Egyptians get them down there? This is the Serapeum of Saqqara, 24 niches cut into the bedrock. Each one holds a sarcophagus weighing up to 70 tons. One lid alone weighs almost 25 tons, about as much as a loaded freight car. Moving that kind of mass today would take a gantry crane and open space to maneuver. The Egyptians had neither. They had a narrow underground corridor a few meters wide. And there's another question archaeologists have been asking for a century and a half. If these are the tombs of sacred bulls, where are the bulls? In 1851, French archaeologist Auguste Mariette uncovered the entrance to a complex first mentioned by the Greek geographer Strabo. Mariette dug through buried passages, running into stelae covered in hieroglyphs. In one of the side galleries, he broke open 22 of the 24 niches. What he found didn't match anything known from Egyptian tombs before it. Massive stone boxes, each carved from a single block of granite, diorite, or basalt. One sarcophagus was still sealed. Mariette believed he'd finally found an untouched burial. His team tried to move the lid. It wouldn't budge. It weighed over 30 tons. So Mariette used dynamite. Inside it was empty. As it turned out, almost every sarcophagus in the Serapeum was empty. Not a single intact bull mummy, just bones and clear signs of looting that had happened long before the excavation. But Mariette did find one thing untouched. In a smaller gallery, he came across a wooden coffin holding a human mummy, buried under sand for nearly 4,000 years. Beside it lay a gold mask and jewelry bearing the cartouche of Prince Khemwaset, son of Ramses II. Khemwaset is credited with major expansions of the Serapeum. Those finds are now held in the Louvre. The complex was in continuous use for over 1,000 years, from the 14th century BC through nearly the end of the Ptolemaic era. It served as the burial place for the Apis bulls, sacred animals the Egyptians believed embodied the god Ptah. After death, a bull became Osiris Apis, a name that later evolved into the Greek Serapis, giving the whole complex its name. The main gallery runs 68 meters, and the full tunnel system stretches nearly 300 meters underground. 24 niches line both sides, each one holding a single monolithic sarcophagus. Precise measurements taken during Mariette's excavation by his colleague Linand de Belfond give us hard numbers. One of the larger sarcophagi weighs 62 tons at most. 37 tons for the body, 24 tons for the lid. The material is Aswan granite. Aswan sits 800 kilometers from Saqqara, by some estimates nearly 1,000. Moving a block that size that distance would require specialized heavy equipment even today. The burial ritual itself was just as elaborate as the transport. Once a bull died, it was treated as a god that had passed. Priests spent roughly 70 days mummifying the body, the same span reserved for a pharaoh. The mummy was then placed inside the sarcophagus in a sphinx pose, front legs folded, amid days of rites and offerings. An avenue nearly 80 meters long led to the complex, lined with chapels for prayer and offerings. On the gallery floors, Mariette noticed something rarely mentioned in popular retellings of this story: roller marks. In one niche, he found 2 horizontal wooden winches fitted with levers. 2 years after Mariette, German Egyptologist Heinrich Breusch visited the Serapeum and documented another detail: a set of double rails still preserved on the floor, the track the sarcophagi were rolled in on. So the Egyptians had a system: rails, rollers, winches. The question isn't whether they had the technology. The question is how that technology lowered a 60-ton block 12 meters underground and rotated it inside a corridor only a few meters wide, and why that process isn't described or shown anywhere on the walls of the Serapeum. Another detail that leaves archaeologists stuck: some lids had extra layers of stone blocks stacked on top. Why weigh down a lid that already weighed 30 tons is still unknown. One working theory is protection against looters, but there's no way to test it. Every niche where this detail appears had already been broken into by the time of excavation. And perhaps the strangest find of all, 3 sarcophagi that Mariette himself recorded seeing in a chamber he considered too dangerous to excavate. They've never been located since. Before electric lighting, the tunnels were lit by candles on wooden stands, sometimes by bursts of burning magnesium. That's the near darkness in which early explorers and visitors first laid eyes on these massive sarcophagi. In 1862, the Serapeum was visited by the Prince of Wales, the future King Edward VII. His party had lunch inside one of the empty sarcophagi. In 1992, the Cairo earthquake cracked the tunnel ceilings, and part of the complex was closed to visitors. Restoration work only resumed in 2020, and several galleries remain off-limits to this day. After a century and a half of research, no scientific publication has offered a step-by-step reconstruction of exactly how a sarcophagus was lowered and set into place. This isn't a fringe claim, it's a gap archaeologists themselves acknowledge. This is where the story gets genuinely contested, the weight of the sarcophagi. Lenaud de Belfond's precise calculation puts one of the larger examples at 62 tons. In his own other notes, he estimated a neighboring sarcophagus at over 70. Some modern sources put the body alone, without the lid, at around 50 tons. Popular guides and articles cite figures as high as 100. The spread across sources is nearly double. We don't have an exact weight for each of the 24 sarcophagi, because they aren't identical and haven't all been measured with the same precision. What we can say with confidence, this is tens of tons of solid stone, moved and installed underground with no surviving written explanation from the people who built it. The distance the stone traveled is just as unsettled. Some sources put it at roughly 800 kilometers down the Nile from Aswan. Others say nearly 1,000. The discrepancy comes down to the fact that a river can't be measured in a straight line, and nobody recorded the exact route the barges took 3,000 years ago. Even something as basic as distance along a known river doesn't have one agreed-upon number. There's one more inconsistency that rarely makes it into popular coverage of the Serapeum. Between the reign of Ramses XI and the 23rd year of Asorkon II, roughly 250 years, archaeologists have found only 9 bull burials. Given that an Apis bull typically lived 25 to 28 years, that span should have produced far more graves. Where are the rest? Are they still sitting in unexcavated sections of the Serapeum? Or were some burials destroyed, and does Mariette's own chronology contain errors? There's no clear answer. There's a related wrinkle. Mariette himself recorded 3 sarcophagi in a chamber too dangerous to excavate. But separately, 4 burials he dated to the reign of Ramesses XI have since been redated by other researchers to a different period entirely. Even the basic timeline the original excavator laid out needs revisiting, which means the picture archaeologists have worked from for a century and a half isn't settled. The first explanation is the standard archaeological one. Blocks were quarried at Aswan, floated down the Nile on barges, then dragged overland on wooden sledges using ramps, levers, and large labor crews. This version is backed by physical evidence found on site: the rails, rollers, and winches. It explains surface transport, but not what happened once a block reached the mouth of the underground gallery. The second theory holds that some chambers may have been built around an already placed sarcophagus, rather than the other way around. That would have reduced the difficulty of maneuvering inside a tight corridor. There's no direct evidence for this, but nothing ruling it out either. The third addresses the precision of the stonework. The interior surfaces of the sarcophagi have near-perfect 90-degree angles and a polished finish. Craftsmen used copper tools and quartz sand as an abrasive. This wasn't fast work. Researchers estimate hand finishing a single block like this could have taken months, possibly years. But the idea that this required some lost technology has no support in any source. It's a hypothesis, not a fact. Mariette broke into the Serapeum nearly 175 years ago. Since then, we've measured the sarcophagi down to the centimeter. We know the weight of individual blocks, the route the granite traveled from Aswan. We found the rollers, rails, and winches the Egyptians used to move that mass. But a step-by-step account of how a 60-ton monolith ended up in a niche 12 meters underground and got turned inside a corridor a few steps wide has never been written in any scientific paper. Maybe the answer is already sitting in an unexcavated section of the Serapeum. Maybe the 3 sarcophagi Mariette saw but never dug out are still waiting under the sands of Saqqara. Parts of the complex have been closed since 1992. Some of the corridors Mariette explored by candlelight have never been resurveyed with modern tools, laser scanning, ground-penetrating radar, current photogrammetry. Until that happens, the Serapeum of Saqqara will remain what it's been for nearly a century and 3/4, one of ancient Egypt's most imposing engineering feats, and one of its least explained.